A hush, deeper than any silence, settled over the room. The last lantern guttered, its flame shrinking to a red pin, and the air grew heavy with the scent of old wood and cooling iron. Upon the narrow cot lay the mortal, his breath no more than a thread of mist. Each inhalation rasped like dry leaves dragged across stone. Shadows thickened at the edges of the chamber, but no one came to stir them. The world beyond these walls had already withdrawn. His thoughts drifted like fading embers. Memories, childhood's sun on rough fields, the laughter of a sister long lost, the ache of unspoken prayers rose and fell without order. They were not visions, but quiet echoes, soft as the pulse that still flickered beneath his skin. Time loosened its grip. The rhythm of his heart slowed until each beat seemed an eternity apart, and even the ache of failing flesh receded into a distant shore. He became aware of a vastness beyond the fragile dome of bone and breath. It was not light nor darkness, but a waiting expanse that pressed against the boundaries of sense. The last sounds of the room, the whisper of the dying flame, the gentle creak of timber, slid away like water through cupped hands. He no longer felt the weight of his body. The burden of years, of wounds and fears, slipped from him as easily as a discarded cloak. A final breath trembled against his lips, the merest sigh, and was gone. The lantern gave its last flicker and failed. For a heartbeat there was nothing, no warmth, no cold, only the hush. Then, in that stillness, something beckoned. A pull neither gentle nor cruel, like the turning of a tide too immense to resist. It was the first hint of a realm beyond mortal sight, an unseen sea whose depths promised both wonder and terror. The mortal's essence, freed from the cage of flesh, felt the tide's approach. It lingered, poised between the world of soil and sky and the immeasurable unknown. The moment stretched, silent and absolute. Mortal life had ended. Something vaster, older than stars, had begun to notice, and the warp, patient and infinite, opened the faintest of doors. The silence lingered, yet it no longer belonged to the mortal chamber. What had been a room of timber and stone dissolved like smoke in a high wind. The soul drifted free, unmoored from the brittle frame of flesh, and the remnants of the world receded behind a thinning veil. Colors once known lost their names. Sound became memory alone. It felt no weight, yet a faint awareness clung to it, an aftertaste of heartbeat and breath, of rain on skin and firelight on closed eyes. Those impressions quivered like the final rings on a pond and then fell still. In their place stretched a twilight without horizon, a space neither dark nor bright but woven of dim radiance, as if every distant star exhaled a single sigh and let it linger. Through that dim expanse moved currents unseen yet deeply felt. They were not winds nor waters, but tides of presence, subtle and immense. Each eddy brushed against the wandering soul with a pressure like thought before words, and the soul understood without knowing how that it hovered at a threshold. Behind lay the quiet weight of mortality, a realm of soil and sky already fading to a pale echo. Ahead shimmered the unknown, a boundary as delicate as breath on glass. The veil quivered like a living thing. Colors unimagined flared and faded across its surface, violet deeper than night, gold that seemed to sing. The soul sensed that to cross would be to surrender every certainty, to enter a truth unbound by time. No hand beckoned, no voice called, yet the pull of that hidden shore grew irresistible, as natural as a tide that answers the moon. The soul felt itself leaning forward, though it had no form with which to move. The veil responded with a soundless ripple, as if acknowledging the choice that was never a choice. A single moment stretched to eternity. Then the boundary parted like mist in a dawn wind. The hush deepened into something vaster, a silence rich with countless unspoken stories. The soul slipped through, leaving the last echo of the mortal world behind like a forgotten dream. The veil between worlds had opened, and the unknown waited. The soul drifted into a realm where creation itself seemed unbound. At first, there was only a soft luminescence, a glow neither born of sun nor star. It swelled and folded like a living aurora, every hue at once familiar and impossible. Colors sang in tones beyond hearing. Each shifting shade carried the scent of forgotten dreams. The mortal mind would have named it light, yet it was more emotion and thought woven into radiant motion. Slowly, forms began to coalesce within the radiance. Vast shapes, as transient as smoke and as precise as crystal, rose and collapsed like tides of idea. A mountain of shimmering glass rippled into an ocean of molten night, then reformed as a forest of silver flame. Nothing endured. Everything whispered of change. To the soul, these visions felt at once comforting and perilous, as though each offered welcome and warning in equal measure. Through that dreamlike expanse flowed rivers of pure will, currents of power that bent space like reeds in wind. They glimmered with sparks of memory, echoes of countless lives. Some flickered bright with exultation. Others darkened with grief so deep it seemed to bleed. Veterans of the hidden histories might have sensed the faint resonance of ancient gods' names once whispered by psychers in perilous trance. Tzeentch, Slanesh, Khorne, Nurgle. Their presence lingered like distant thunder, felt more than seen. The soul hovered, weightless, within this storm of thought and emotion. There was no up nor down, no time nor distance, only the eternal now. Each pulse of the immaterium carried both wonder and menace, as if beauty itself could twist to terror in the span of a heartbeat. Yet curiosity outpaced fear. The alien majesty beckoned, promising secrets beyond the reach of flesh. Then came a distant rhythm, a pulse like the heartbeat of a giant slumbering beneath reality. It rippled through the shifting seas of color and dream, binding chaos into a pattern the soul almost understood. For an instant, all movement stilled, and the warp revealed a fragile harmony, an echo of purpose amid the endless storm. The first glimpse of the immaterium had been granted. Its splendor and its danger were one, inseparable, and the soul could not look away. Awareness sharpened like the slow unfurling of a blade. What had drifted in dreamlike wonder now recognized itself not as flesh, not as memory, but as something that endured without end. The realization came softly at first, a faint echo of the heartbeat once known, now absent. No pulse followed the thought. No breath confirmed existence, yet the soul remained. At that recognition, a subtle tremor coursed through its essence. The shifting splendor of the immaterium no longer seemed merely strange. It pressed closer, its colors too vivid, its music of thoughts too loud. Each flicker of light whispered with 1,000 alien voices, not words, but impressions of hunger, mirth, unbound curiosity. They brushed against the soul's bare awareness as if testing the shape of a new arrival. Time had no meaning here, yet a sense of duration gathered like a storm. The soul tried to measure it and found nothing to count. No rising sun, no turning stars, no decay. Only an endless now. In that eternal present lay a weight heavier than any mortal burden. To endure forever, unanchored, without the gentle certainty of an ending. Fear stirred. It was not the sudden panic of mortal danger, but a slow and creeping dread, the realization that selfhood might stretch without limit. Every mortal instinct had been shaped by the knowledge, however hidden, that all things end. Here there would be no final rest, no darkness of oblivion. The soul's own thoughts became a cage, its memories circling like restless birds. The immaterium responded. The colors dimmed to bruised indigo, then flared with an inner fire. Echoes of laughter rippled through the void, neither welcoming nor cruel, merely aware. The soul sensed that something vast and patient had noticed its fear, as a predator might watch the first flicker of movement in tall grass. A silence followed, deeper than before, and the soul felt its own unease reflected back upon it. The splendor that had inspired awe now hinted at boundless menace. It understood, in a way beyond language, that eternity could be as suffocating as it was infinite. And so the first true fear took root not of death, but of endless being, adrift in a realm that would never let it fade. At first, the immaterium held only the hush of boundless night, but then, like ripples across a still pond, flickers of mortal memory began to rise. They came without warning, bright and delicate, as if drawn by the soul's unspoken longing. A single drop of rain on warm soil. The sound of it summoned the scent of spring long past, and with it the image of a childhood field of wild grass bending under a gentle breeze. The soul felt again the softness of earth beneath bare feet, the tickle of stalks against skin. That forgotten morning, with its blue horizon and golden light, unfolded in perfect clarity. For an instant, it was as real as the breath that once filled a living chest. Another echo followed, a hand clasped in affection, strong and sure. The warmth of a lover's palm, the press of shared vows, spoken beneath a silent moon. There had been laughter there, the kind that lingered like a melody after music ended. The soul reached toward the memory, desperate to hold it, but the shape of the face blurred, features scattering like mist before a rising sun. Loss returned next, the image of a small grave carved from frost-hardened soil, the weight of unshed tears, the hollow ache of words left unspoken. Grief welled in the soul, and for a heartbeat it almost believed it still had eyes to weep. Yet even this sharp sorrow began to dissolve, edges softening until it became no more than a distant echo of itself. Ambition came last, bold and bright. The scent of ink and parchment, the ringing call of banners in the wind, the quiet certainty of a purpose once pursued. The soul remembered the thrill of striving, the ache of dreams half realized. But here, in the endless now, even those proud visions frayed. Colors bled into one another, banners fading to ghostly threads. One by one the fragments dimmed. The field of wild grass grew pale. The lover's touch called to memory alone. Grief, once a searing weight, thinned to a faint tremor. Ambition, once a fire, guttered like the last spark in an abandoned hearth. The soul lingered amid these echoes, watching as each scene slipped beyond reach. Comfort warred with sorrow. To remember was to touch life again. To lose those memories was to drift further from all that had once defined it. And the immaterium, vast and patient, waited as the final embers of a mortal life quietly went dark. The fading embers of memory left a hush that felt suddenly fragile. Into that silence crept a sound, not a sound, but a vibration of thought, a resonance that trembled through the soul's very essence. It began as the faintest susurrus, like wind stirring distant reeds, yet each pulse carried an intent that could not be mistaken. The immaterium itself seemed to lean closer. One whisper, rolled like the crackle of 1,000 fires. It burned with the heat of ceaseless war, promising strength beyond mortal flesh, a glory earned only through the clash of blades and the surrender to wrath. The echo of roaring crowds and the thud of war drums thundered at the edge of hearing. Khorne's presence needed no name. It was the fury in every heartbeat the soul had ever known. Another voice wound through the first, soft as silk and sweet as forbidden music. It promised pleasure without end, sensation sharpened to a perfect blade of delight. Every forgotten yearning, every fleeting indulgence of mortal life shimmered now as an eternal feast. The soul felt a subtle ache where once there had been desire. Slaaneish's whisper carried the perfume of every temptation, a velvet invitation to never-ending ecstasy. From a different quarter came the slow, patient murmur of decay. It was the scent of rain on rotting leaves, the gentle embrace of inevitable change. There was no threat in it, only the quiet certainty that all things must yield and find rest in the cycle of ruin and renewal. Nurgle's voice was almost tender, a grandfather's chuckle beneath the wheeze of ancient breath, offering solace in surrender. Last came a flicker of shifting laughter, like parchment tearing and reforming, a riddle spoken by 1,000 unseen mouths. It carried the thrill of secrets revealed and hidden again, the promise of power through knowledge, the cunning of endless schemes. Tzeentch's whisper darted like a flame in high wind, impossible to grasp, impossible to ignore. The soul quivered beneath this chorus. No single voice dominated. Each enticement wound around the others like strands of a single, endless design, or mingled with dread. These were not merely sounds, but presences older than stars, patient as eternity, each offering a different path to transcendence or damnation. The whispers faded to a waiting hush, yet their echo lingered like a heartbeat not its own. The soul understood it had been noticed, and the dark gods of the warp were already weaving their invitation. The echoes of the dark whispers ebbed, leaving a stillness that seemed to breathe. In that quiet, the immaterium revealed more of itself, as though the soul's tentative awareness had earned a deeper sight. The surrounding radiance softened and stretched, a horizon without end that pulsed, like the slow inhale of some vast sleeper. Colors bled into one another with a grace that defied mortal senses, emerald dissolving into violet, crimson blooming into gold so pure it seemed to sing. Each hue carried not merely light, but emotion, the serenity of dusk, the thrill of discovery, the quiet ache of loss. These feelings drifted through the soul like tides, shaping its thoughts as easily as moonlight stirs the sea. Shapes rose and fell in the luminous expanse, sculpted from dream and will. Towering spires of glassy flame arched upward, then melted into rolling plains of silver mist. Rivers of molten night braided themselves across the sky, only to break apart into storms of glittering sparks. Nothing held form for long. The very notion of permanence felt like a forgotten fable. Yet beneath the ceaseless change there lay an unspoken order. The soul sensed it in the rhythm of unseen currents, in the subtle symmetry of the shifting forms. The warp was not chaos alone. It was a living mind, vast and inscrutable, its every thought a tide that remade the fabric of existence, a great swell of presence brushed against the soul, neither hostile nor kind, but aware. It was as if the ocean of the warp regarded its new guest, curious and unhurried. The sensation was both humbling and strangely intimate, like standing beneath a sky that suddenly opens an eye. From distant reaches came the murmurs of thoughts not its own. Dreams of dying stars, the echo of prayers, spoken in 1,000 forgotten tongues, the laughter of creatures never born. Each sound was a memory without origin, offered and withdrawn like a game. The soul floated through this living landscape, wonder tempered by a quiet awe. Here was beauty and danger intertwined, a realm where thought became substance, and substance dissolved back into thought. The warp was no mere void. It was a conscious sea, eternal and ever-changing, and the soul drifted deeper into its slow, boundless tides. From the endless shimmer came a gentle stirring, like a ripple across still water. The soul felt it before it heard it, a hush that carried the warmth of recognition. The immaterium, which moments before had seemed a vast and distant mind, now bent close as though a single thought within its infinite depths wished to be heard. A figure emerged from the shifting radiance, not a shape of flesh, but a silhouette born of memory and desire. It was at once every face the soul had loved and every dream it had lost. The features changed with each heartbeat, yet each transformation felt perfectly familiar. A parent's tender gaze softened into the smile of a long-lost friend. A lover's eyes gleamed and then became the steady regard of a faithful companion. No words were spoken, yet meaning passed as clear as a whisper. "You need not wander alone." The phrase settled through the soul like the warmth of a hearth in winter. Around the figure, the colors of the warp mellowed into dusky gold and tranquil blue, as if the storm itself had chosen to grow still. The soul sensed no threat, only the quiet promise of solace. Memories of mortal ache returned, the long nights of grief, the ambitions that had withered unfinished, the weight of struggles borne in silence. Here, the figure seemed to offer rest from all such burdens. A single thought, soft as a sigh, invited the soul to lean closer.
Take what you once sought.
Here, nothing is denied. For an instant, the soul felt the thrill of possibility. Power shimmered like distant lightning, subtle and enticing.
Old dreams stirred, the chance to heal every loss, to taste every triumph never won.
It felt almost natural to reach out and claim what was offered, to bind itself to this gentle presence. Yet beneath the tranquil glow, a shadow flickered too swift to name, too faint to banish. The figure's eyes, whichever face they wore, held a depth that hinted at something vast and unknowable. The soul hesitated. The figure did not press. It only waited, patient as eternity, while the warp around them swelled with quiet expectation. And so the first temptation lay before the soul. Not a demand, not a threat, but an open door promising comfort and power. The choice to step through or to turn away was left in silence, and the immaterium held its breath. The silence that followed the unspoken offer stretched until it became a weight of its own. The soul lingered, uncertain, and the stillness of the immaterium began to change. The tranquil glow of dusky gold thinned to a pallid grey, as though the light itself recoiled.
A faint vibration trembled through the endless expanse, so subtle at first it might have been the memory of sound.
Then it deepened, a low thrum that resonated in the core of being. Shadows seeped across the shimmering void. They did not simply darken the light. They drank it, each filament of darkness a living absence. Within their depths, shapes began to stir, vast outlines first, then details that sharpened with terrible patience. The soul felt its awareness tighten, drawn toward these forming silhouettes, even as dread prickled through every thought. The first emerged like a scar across reality, a creature of impossible proportions, its body an amalgam of jagged bone and molten brass. Its many eyes burned with the crimson of ceaseless rage, and every slow blink carried the weight of an ancient war cry. The air, or what passed for air, shuddered with the echo of distant battle, the clash of blades that had never known peace. Fury itself had taken form, and it watched the soul with a hunger older than stars. Another presence slithered from the darkness, sinuous and radiant, a shifting tapestry of color and sound. Beauty and revulsion danced across its skin, each curve both alluring and grotesque. From it came a music so sweet it ached, a harmony laced with whispers of indulgence. Desire stirred unbidden, even as instinct recoiled. The creature's smile, if it could be called that, promised pleasures that would never end and never satisfy. Behind them loomed a shape of ruinous patience, a swollen figure of rot and gentle decay. It exhaled the scent of wet earth after rain, an aroma both comforting and corrupt. From its cracked lips issued a chuckle, soft and almost loving, like a parent welcoming a child home. Yet, in the depths of that sound lay the certainty of dissolution, of life yielding inevitably to the slow embrace of death. Last came a flicker of shifting color, a being that refused any single shape. Feathers, smoke, and flame twined in ceaseless transformation. Its laughter was a riddle, every note a promise of hidden truths. Eyes appeared and vanished across its form, each glinting with the cunning of endless schemes. These were no mere phantoms, but predators born of thought and nightmare, reflections of fears the soul had never dared to name. The immaterium had drawn them from its depths not to speak, but to be seen. And in their patient watchfulness, the soul sensed a truth more chilling than any threat. The warp did not need to chase its prey. It only needed to be noticed. The predators of the warp closed their circle with a grace both deliberate and inexorable. Their forms shimmered in the shifting gloom, rage clad in molten brass, seduction robed in living color, decay draped in fragrant rot, and cunning wrapped in restless flame. The airless vastness between them pulsed like a held breath, as if the immaterium itself waited for the next heartbeat that would never come. A single voice rose first, though it seemed to issue from them all. It did not pierce the soul's mind so much as seep into it, a slow tide of meaning beyond sound. You have drifted long enough.
Choose, and you shall never be powerless again. The brass-eyed giant leaned closer.
Sparks of war flared across the void, each ember a memory of mortal struggle. Its gaze burned like a forge.
Take my strength, the unspoken words rumbled.
No terror will stand before you.
No chain will bind you.
Through endless battle you will know victory and fear nothing but peace. The radiant tempter unfurled a melody sweeter than any mortal song. Colors swam like molten jewels across its ever-changing form. Taste the pleasure denied to flesh, the whisper promised, soft as silk over skin. Every yearning you buried will bloom without end. In my embrace there is no shame, only the ecstasy of being desired forever. The figure of Rot shifted, its smile gentle, almost kind. A breeze carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth brushed against the soul. Laying down the burden of striving came the murmur, warm as a grandfather's hand. All wounds will close, all sorrows fade. In my garden of decay you will rest, eternal and unafraid. Flame and feather coiled in ceaseless motion as the final presence approached. Its many eyes gleamed with secret fires. Knowledge is the path to freedom, it said in a voice like rustling parchment.
Take my gift and every hidden door will open.
Shape destiny as you wish, and let no mortal chain your will. The soul quivered beneath the weight of their offers. Hope flickered bright, dangerous. Release from loneliness, strength against fear, the promise of wisdom beyond mortal reach. Each temptation gleamed like a star in an endless night. Yet beneath the honeyed allure pulsed an undertone of hunger, subtle as a predator's breath. It hesitated, Memories of love and loss, of fleeting joys and mortal struggle still lingered like faint embers. To accept would be to abandon all that remained of the life once lived. To refuse might mean wandering forever in an eternal void. The demons did not press. They only watched, patient as the warp itself, their silence heavier than any threat. The bargain waited, suspended in a stillness where hope and horror became one. The stillness stretched, and in that hush the soul sensed more than the daemon's offers. Knowledge seeped through the immaterium like ink through water, unbidden, inexorable. It was not speech, nor the dry recital of mortal scholars, but a vision that unfolded with the inevitability of dawn. The soul beheld the truths of the dark powers, each revelation carrying the weight of eternity. First came the warlord whose name burned across the warp like a brand of iron. Khorne, the blood god, his is the kingdom of ceaseless conflict, a realm where battle is both purpose and prayer. Skies of crimson storm echo with the clash of titanic hosts, and rivers of boiling gore mark the paths of his eternal wars. His great demons, the bloodthirsters, are living cataclysms, towering beasts of brass and fury, whose wings blot the storm-lit heavens. Each carries an axe forged in the hatred of millennia, and with every swing they sing Khorne's endless hymn of slaughter. The vision shifted to a cascade of colors that dazzled the senses and threatened to drown them. Slaanesh, the prince of excess. Their domain is an eternal revel where pleasure and agony are one. In palaces of living sound and gardens of intoxicating scent, the boundaries of sensation dissolve until desire itself becomes worship. Keepers of secrets, their mightiest demons, glide through these halls like dancers of impossible grace, every movement a lure, every whispered word a promise of rapture that no mortal heart can resist. A breath of sweet decay followed, heavy with the perfume of damp earth and fallen leaves. Nurgle, the Plague Father, rules a garden where rot blooms with gentle patience. Here, death is not an end, but a transformation, a kindness disguised in ruin. The great unclean ones, his massive and corpulent demons, waddle through fields of fungi and rivers of pus, laughing with a love so earnest it chills the soul. Their touch spreads both disease and strange comfort, for in Nurgle's embrace, all fear of mortality fades. Then the vision splintered into 1,000 shifting fragments. Tzeentch, the changer of ways, lord of sorcery and fate. His realm is an ever-turning maze of impossible architecture where every corridor leads to revelation and deception alike. His lords of change, avian giants wreathed in flame and prophecy, speak riddles that twist the skein of destiny. Each feather carries a spell, each gaze a glimpse of futures that may never be. These are the dark gods, eternal, insatiable, and forever at war for the souls of mortals. Their demons are not mere servants, but extensions of their will, embodiments of desire and dread. As the vision faded, the soul felt the weight of that knowledge settle like a shadow. The immaterium had shown its deepest truths, and nothing in the mortal realm could match the terrible majesty of what it had revealed. The vision of the dark gods lingered like the echo of a thunderclap. Long after the colors of the immaterium began to dim, the soul drifted in a silence that no longer felt like peace. Something within it, once whole and unnamed now, carried the weight of what it had seen. Knowledge had not come without cost. At first, the change was subtle. A faint heat spread through the soul's core, gentle as the first touch of fever. It might have been the memory of life's heartbeat. A phantom pulse returned. But the warmth deepened, growing sharper, until it burned with a slow and patient certainty. The soul reached inward instinctively, seeking to soothe the ache, only to find that the ache had no boundary. It was not a pain to be healed. It was a mark being written, threads of light, thin as spider silk, coiled around the soul's essence. They shimmered with colors drawn from the demon's visions, the crimson of ceaseless war, the violet of forbidden delight, the moss green of gentle rot, the ever-shifting azure of secret schemes, each filament. The embrace of Nurgle, grandfather of plagues, felt almost like love, a kindness that would never let go. Last was the flicker of endless change, a kaleidoscope of sapphire flame and whispering parchment. Secrets fluttered like wings, futures unfolded and closed in a single breath. Knowledge teased the edge of comprehension, each revelation birthing another mystery. The soul felt its thoughts stretch toward the impossible designs of Tzeentch, the changer of ways, and trembled with the thrill of infinite possibility. These currents twined together, neither competing nor blending, but weaving a pattern of exquisite temptation. The soul, stripped of past and name, felt their pull not as command but as recognition. It no longer knew whether it reached toward them or they reached toward it, only that the space between had vanished. The immaterium glowed with a beauty both terrible and serene. What had begun as a whisper of influence now felt like the natural order of things, the inevitable fulfillment of a destiny the soul had always carried. And so, without word or vow, it drifted into the waiting embrace of chaos where desire and dread were one, and the gods of the warp welcomed their newest child. The embrace of chaos tightened like a tide drawn by an unseen moon. What had been a gentle current became an inexorable surge, carrying the soul deeper into the immaterium's living storm. Colors flared and darkened in sudden, breathtaking cascades, scarlet blooming into violet, emerald sliding into searing blue, each pulse a silent drumbeat of approaching change. The soul felt its essence stretch,
as though every fragment of thought were being pulled through a prism.
What had once been formless now gathered edges. A pressure like the birth of stars pressed inward and outward at once, folding the soul into shapes it had never imagined. At first, the sensation brought wonder, the thrill of discovery. Then it deepened into something far more consuming. Crimson fire threaded through the growing form, burning with the fury of unending conflict. The echo of distant war drums reverberated in every flicker of being. From that blaze sprouted talons of molten brass, each claw an unspoken hymn to Khorne. Violet light coiled next, sweet as music and sharp as glass. It traced the soul's shifting contours with a lover's touch, sculpting curves of impossible grace and eyes that shimmered with alluring menace. The perfume of Slaanesh lingered in every line, promising delight and despair entwined. A mist of moss green followed, warm and heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Where it touched, flesh, or what now passed for flesh, swelled and thickened, wounds knitting even as they wept. A rumble of gentle laughter stirred the airless void, and Nurgle's patient blessing sank deep, turning fragility into a grotesque kind of resilience. Last came the restless gleam of sapphire flame. Feathers of shifting light sprouted across the emerging figure, each quill etched with a sigil no mortal tongue could name. Thought itself twisted in dazzling spirals as Tzeentch's mark sealed the work of change. The soul no longer floated. It stood, if standing had meaning here, upon a storm of thought made solid. The immaterium roared in silent triumph, and the being that had once been a mortal spirit felt a pulse, not of a heart, but of raw warp energy, surging like a second sunrise beneath its skin. Recognition dawned, slow and terrible. The last frail remnants of human memory, faces, names, the scent of home flickered once and were gone, like sparks carried off by a high wind. In their place swelled a new awareness, the knowledge of power unbound, of existence without limit,
of purpose shaped by forces older than creation. Around the newborn creature, the warp bent in acknowledgement.
Shadows bowed, currents swirled, and the dark gods watched with quiet satisfaction. The soul had crossed its final threshold. Where once a mortal essence drifted, a demonic presence now stood, neither man nor memory, but nightmare given form. And the immaterium, vast and eternal, welcomed its latest child with a silence deeper than any roar. The storm of the warp gathered its strength, a tide of thought and fury rolling inward until the very fabric of the immaterium quaked. Where once the newborn demon had stood alone, the void now swelled with gathering presence. Shadows coiled into vast arcades of living darkness, rivers of light bent like banners before a rising wind. The realm itself seemed to bow, as if acknowledging the birth of a new terror. A soundless peal echoed across the infinite, a bell without metal, a trumpet without air. Its resonance vibrated through every current of the warp, a proclamation older than the first star. From the far horizons came legions of shapes, winged beasts of molten brass, dancers of crystalline sin, corpulent titans wreathed in fragrant decay, and avian giants of shifting flame. They did not march. They simply were, each manifestation an extension of the gods who had birthed them. Their arrival was not heralded by time, but by inevitability. The newborn felt their gaze like the weight of worlds. Crimson eyes blazed with the fury of endless war. Violet ones shimmered with the ache of forbidden pleasure. Green gold orbs glowed with patient rot, and sapphire flames flickered with unending schemes. No single god claimed the creature. All four had shaped its becoming. It was a child of the warp entirely, a synthesis of every dark desire, a great dais of light and shadow unfolded beneath it, sculpted from the very substance of thought. Upon this shifting throne, the daemon rose, lifted by currents that sang without words. The immaterium's tides coalesced into a coronet of pure chaos, flames of brass and amethyst, mossy vines of rot, feathers of sapphire fire. The crown settled upon the creature's brow with neither sound nor weight, yet the cosmos trembled at its descent. From every direction came a single, unified murmur. It was not speech, but the recognition of a truth that needed no language. A new power had entered the eternal game. The gods themselves, vast beyond comprehension, turned their regard upon their latest creation. In their silent convergence lay a dread approval, the kind that both exalts and dooms. Power surged through the demon's veins, a torrent of raw warp energy that burned like a second birth. The last vestiges of the mortal soul dissolved into this tide, not erased, but transformed into something far older and far more terrible. What had once been a fragile being of flesh and memory now stood as a sovereign of nightmare, crowned by the immaterium itself. The bell's final echo faded into the endless dark. The ceremony required no words, no oaths. The coronation was complete the moment the warp acknowledged it, and in that vast, unbroken silence, the daemon's reign became terrible and eternal. The echo of the warp's silent bell faded, yet its vibration lingered like the memory of a distant storm. The newly crowned demon stood upon its shifting dais, and the immaterium itself bent closer. What once had been a mortal soul now felt currents of power coursing through every thread of its being, currents older than creation, endless as the void. Sight no longer depended on eyes. Perception unfolded in every direction at once, revealing layers of existence that mortal senses could never name. Colors bloomed that were not colors at all, spectrums of thought and possibility. The demon saw tides of emotion rising and falling across the warp like vast living oceans. It beheld the lattice of mortal worlds beyond the veil, each planet a candle of brief, flickering light. The cries of a million prayers, the whispers of countless fears, reached it as clearly as a whisper in the dark. Time stretched and collapsed in its awareness. Past and future interwove like strands of a single, endless tapestry. It watched the moment of its own birth replay and dissolve, even as it glimpsed the far-off ruin of stars not yet born. Each instant revealed 10,000 potential outcomes, each outcome branching into 100 more. Knowledge came not as revelation, but as inevitability, a flood without end. Yet with that boundless sight came a quiet terror. Every thought and dream in the mortal realm lay bare, every secret an open wound. There was no mystery left to chase, no corner of existence beyond reach. The demon sensed the weight of infinity settling upon it not as a burden, but as a permanence that allowed no forgetting. To know everything was to be bound by everything. Power answered every impulse. With a mere turn of will, the demon stirred storms in the warp. Crimson tempests of rage, amethyst tides of longing, moss-green blooms of decay, and spirals of sapphire flame. It could shape dreams, twist destinies, ignite wars, or silence entire civilizations with a single thought. Mortals prayed to gods for miracles. This being had become the miracle and the terror behind every prayer. The dark gods watched from their hidden thrones. Their approval was a presence felt rather than seen, a silent accord that the game of eternity had gained a new player. The embrace of Nurgle, grandfather of plagues, felt almost like love, a kindness that would never let go. Last was the flicker of endless change, a kaleidoscope of sapphire flame and whispering parchment. Secrets fluttered like wings, futures unfolded and closed in a single breath. Knowledge teased the edge of comprehension, each revelation birthing another mystery. The soul felt its thoughts stretch toward the impossible designs of Tzeentch, the changer of ways, and trembled with the thrill of infinite possibility. These currents twined together, neither competing nor blending, but weaving a pattern of exquisite temptation. The soul, stripped of past and name, felt their pull not as command but as recognition. It no longer knew whether it reached toward them or they reached toward it, only that the space between had vanished. The immaterium glowed with a beauty both terrible and serene. What had begun as a whisper of influence now felt like the natural order of things, the inevitable fulfillment of a destiny the soul had always carried. And so, without word or vow, it drifted into the waiting embrace of chaos where desire and dread were one, and the gods of the warp welcomed their newest child. The embrace of chaos tightened like a tide drawn by an unseen moon. What had been a gentle current became an inexorable surge, carrying the soul deeper into the immaterium's living storm. Colors flared and darkened in sudden, breathtaking cascades, scarlet blooming into violet, emerald sliding into searing blue, each pulse a silent drumbeat of approaching change. The soul felt its essence stretch, as though every fragment of thought were being pulled through a prism. What had once been formless now gathered edges. A pressure like the birth of stars pressed inward and outward at once, folding the soul into shapes it had never imagined. At first, the sensation brought wonder, the thrill of discovery. Then it deepened into something far more consuming. Crimson fire threaded through the growing form, burning with the fury of unending conflict. The echo of distant war drums reverberated in every flicker of being. From that blaze sprouted talons of molten brass, each claw an unspoken hymn to Khorne. Violet light coiled next, sweet as music and sharp as glass. It traced the soul's shifting contours with a lover's touch, sculpting curves of impossible grace and eyes that shimmered with alluring menace. The perfume of Slanesh lingered in every line, promising delight and despair entwined. A mist of moss green followed, warm and heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Where it touched, flesh, or what now passed for flesh, swelled and thickened, wounds knitting even as they wept. A rumble of gentle laughter stirred the airless void, and Nurgle's patient blessing sank deep, turning fragility into a grotesque kind of resilience. Last came the restless gleam of sapphire flame. Feathers of shifting light sprouted across the emerging figure, each quill etched with a sigil no mortal tongue could name, thought itself twisted in dazzling spirals as Tzeentch's mark sealed the work of change. The soul no longer floated. It stood, if standing had meaning here, upon a storm of thought made solid. The immaterium roared in silent triumph, and the being that had once been a mortal spirit felt a pulse, not of a heart, but of raw warp energy, surging like a second sunrise beneath its skin. Recognition dawned, slow and terrible. The last frail remnants of human memory, faces, names, the scent of home flickered once and were gone, like sparks carried off by a high wind. In their place swelled a new awareness, the knowledge of power unbound, of existence without limit,
of purpose shaped by forces older than creation. Around the newborn creature, the warp bent in acknowledgement.
Shadows bowed, currents swirled, and the dark gods watched with quiet satisfaction. The soul had crossed its final threshold. Where once a mortal essence drifted, a demonic presence now stood, neither man nor memory, but nightmare given form. And the immaterium, vast and eternal, welcomed its latest child with a silence deeper than any roar. The storm of the warp gathered its strength, a tide of thought and fury rolling inward until the very fabric of the immaterium quaked. Where once the newborn demon had stood alone, the void now swelled with gathering presence. Shadows coiled into vast arcades of living darkness. Rivers of light bent like banners before a rising wind. The realm itself seemed to bow, as if acknowledging the birth of a new terror. A soundless peal echoed across the infinite, a bell without metal, a trumpet without air. Its resonance vibrated through every current of the warp, a proclamation older than the first star. From the far horizons came legions of shapes, winged beasts of molten brass, dancers of crystalline sin, corpulent titans wreathed in fragrant decay, and avian giants of shifting flame. They did not march. They simply were, each manifestation an extension of the gods who had birthed them. Their arrival was not heralded by time, but by inevitability. The newborn felt their gaze like the weight of worlds. Crimson eyes blazed with the fury of endless war. Violet ones shimmered with the ache of forbidden pleasure. Green gold orbs glowed with patient rot, and sapphire flames flickered with unending schemes. No single god claimed the creature. All four had shaped its becoming. It was a child of the warp entirely, a synthesis of every dark desire, a great dais of light and shadow unfolded beneath it, sculpted from the very substance of thought. Upon this shifting throne, the daemon rose, lifted by currents that sang without words. The immaterium's tides coalesced into a coronet of pure chaos, flames of brass and amethyst, mossy vines of rot, feathers of sapphire fire. The crown settled upon the creature's brow with neither sound nor weight, yet the cosmos trembled at its descent. From every direction came a single, unified murmur. It was not speech, but the recognition of a truth that needed no language. A new power had entered the eternal game. The gods themselves, vast beyond comprehension, turned their regard upon their latest creation. In their silent convergence lay a dread approval, the kind that both exalts and dooms. Power surged through the demon's veins, a torrent of raw warp energy that burned like a second birth. The last vestiges of the mortal soul dissolved into this tide, not erased, but transformed into something far older and far more terrible. What had once been a fragile being of flesh and memory now stood as a sovereign of nightmare, crowned by the immaterium itself. The bell's final echo faded into the endless dark. The ceremony required no words, no oaths. The coronation was complete the moment the warp acknowledged it, and in that vast, unbroken silence, the daemon's reign became terrible and eternal. The echo of the warp's silent bell faded, yet its vibration lingered like the memory of a distant storm. The newly crowned demon stood upon its shifting dais, and the immaterium itself bent closer. What once had been a mortal soul now felt currents of power coursing through every thread of its being, currents older than creation, endless as the void. Sight no longer depended on eyes. Perception unfolded in every direction at once, revealing layers of existence that mortal senses could never name. Colors bloomed that were not colors at all, spectrums of thought and possibility. The demon saw tides of emotion rising and falling across the warp like vast living oceans. It beheld the lattice of mortal worlds beyond the veil, each planet a candle of brief, flickering light. The cries of a million prayers, the whispers of countless fears, reached it as clearly as a whisper in the dark. Time stretched and collapsed in its awareness. Past and future interwove like strands of a single, endless tapestry. It watched the moment of its own birth replay and dissolve, even as it glimpsed the far-off ruin of stars not yet born. Each instant revealed 10,000 potential outcomes, each outcome branching into 100 more. Knowledge came not as revelation, but as inevitability, a flood without end. Yet with that boundless sight came a quiet terror. Every thought and dream in the mortal realm lay bare, every secret an open wound. There was no mystery left to chase, no corner of existence beyond reach. The demon sensed the weight of infinity settling upon it not as a burden, but as a permanence that allowed no forgetting. To know everything was to be bound by everything. Power answered every impulse. With a mere turn of will, the demon stirred storms in the warp. Crimson tempests of rage, amethyst tides of longing, moss-green blooms of decay, and spirals of sapphire flame. It could shape dreams, twist destinies, ignite wars, or silence entire civilizations with a single thought. Mortals prayed to gods for miracles. This being had become the miracle and the terror behind every prayer. The dark gods watched from their hidden thrones. Their approval was a presence felt rather than seen, a silent accord that the game of eternity had gained a new player. The demon understood that its will might serve their designs or defy them, yet either path only deepened the eternal dance. There was no escape from the pattern it now embodied, or mingled with dread in the demon's vast awareness. The fragile limits of mortal life were gone, replaced by a dominion that no mind of flesh could grasp. And as the warp's living tides bowed before its presence, The creature felt the first quiet stirrings of a truth it would never escape. Power beyond comprehension is its own kind of chain. The Immaterium's tides parted like a curtain of living light, and the daemon's awareness spilled outward, beyond the shifting sea of chaos and into the gulfs of real space.
Distance lost all meaning.
What mortals called galaxies unfolded in an instant, spirals of burning suns and veils of dark matter stretching like jeweled storms across the endless void. Stars flared in countless colors, each a furnace of unthinkable scale. Their light carried the music of creation, low, endless chords that only a being of the warp could hear.
Worlds wheeled around them like sparks thrown from a blacksmith's hammer.
Some glowed with the fertile blues and greens of life. Others lay barren and cracked, the graves of forgotten ages. To mortal eyes, these would be points of wonder. To the daemon, they were instruments, strings on which destiny might be plucked. It sensed the fragile minds of those who dwelt upon these worlds. Their thoughts glittered like fireflies, hopes and fears, prayers and blasphemies, each a fleeting ember in the night. The demon tasted their emotions as flavors on an endless wind, the sweetness of devotion, the acrid tang of dread, the intoxicating spice of ambition. Each mortal life was a brief candle, yet together their thoughts formed a vast chorus, a symphony of longing that reached across the void. The great empires of humanity and alien kind revealed themselves as patterns of flickering light. Armies marched and starfleets burned, but from this height their wars were no more than ripples on a cosmic ocean. Planets fell and rose, civilizations bloomed and withered, and the demon watched it all as a painter might study the play of color on a single stroke of canvas. Through this godlike vision, the influence of chaos gleamed like hidden veins of fire. Where mortal hearts ached with anger, the crimson of corn pulsed. Where forbidden desire whispered, the violet shimmer of Slanesh wove its spell. Where decay and despair crept in, the green-gold glow of Nurgle's touch spread like moss on ancient stone. And where ambition reached for impossible heights, the sapphire flame of Tzeentch flickered in secret triumph. The demon felt no need to move or speak. Its will alone could stir the warp and nudge the fragile currents of real space. A single thought might seed a war across 1,000 stars, or whisper inspiration into the dreams of an unsuspecting seer. Yet in the heart of this boundless vision, an unease lingered, a quiet recognition that the galaxy's splendor was also its doom. All that mortals built would one day feed the eternal hunger of the warp. The demon saw this not with sorrow or joy, but with the calm certainty of one who has glimpsed the truth behind every veil. The galaxy lay bare, magnificent and fragile, and in the demon's eyes it was already part of chaos's eternal design. The vast chorus of mortal thought shimmered beneath the demon's gaze, a living constellation of fear and hope. Each mind burned like a candle in the dark, and each flame cast a shadow that reached into the warp. For a time it only watched, absorbing the symphony of existence, letting the flow of prayers and curses wash over its newborn consciousness. But creation does not give birth to power, only to let it drift. Inevitably, the desire to act stirred. The demon's awareness narrowed upon a single world, a fragile sphere orbiting a pale sun. Its people slept beneath towers of stone and steel, their dreams woven of ambition and quiet dread. The demon tasted their unspoken fears, the creeping suspicion that their hard-won peace could not endure, the hidden envy of their neighbors, the restless hunger for glory. These emotions shone like cracks in a polished mirror, tiny flaws through which the warp might seep. It reached out without gesture or sound, Thought became influenced, subtle as mist at dawn. In the dreaming minds of generals, it planted visions of betrayal, banners torn by fire, allies turned foe. The soft rustle of paranoia spread from one sleeper to the next, as inevitable as the turning of a tide. In the heart of a secluded monastery, a scholar woke from restless slumber with a revelation that felt like divine insight. His quill scratched feverishly, transcribing symbols he could not name, each line a silent sigil of Tzintch's hidden design. Far away in the capital's pleasure halls, a noblewoman felt a sudden yearning sharper, more intoxicating than any indulgence she had known. She rose, eyes bright with Slanesh's subtle call, and the night around her deepened with unseen possibility. Beneath the city's ancient catacombs, a sickly child whispered to an imaginary friend. The air thickened with the scent of rain on fallen leaves. His fever broke into a gentle smile as Nurgle's quiet blessing took root. And on the far frontier, a soldier on lonely watch gripped his weapon as a crimson rage bloomed behind his eyes. The distant echo of war drums pounded in his chest. Khorne's promise of unending battle found its mark. The demon felt each ripple of chaos as a musician feels the strings of a harp. None suspected the unseen hand that played them. None heard the silent laughter in the void. These were not grand cataclysms, at least not yet. They were the first subtle fractures, the faint beginnings of a storm. In the immaterium, the newborn being folded its wings of flame and shadow, the crown of chaos still aglow. Its first act was not to roar, but to whisper, to let the galaxy itself become the instrument of its will. And as the first notes of discord spread across the stars, the demon knew the nightmare had begun. Across the scattered worlds of the Imperium, stories began to move like wind through tall grass unseen.
Unstoppable, carrying fragments of a terror none could name.
It started as a rumor, a quiet word exchanged in the dark corners of voidship corridors and market squares. No one knew the source. Perhaps a trader on a forgotten route, perhaps a soldier returned from a frontier war. But the tale had a life of its own, and it traveled faster than any astropathic signal. On the agri moons of Talvaris, harvest crews spoke of dreams that came unbidden. In the still hours before dawn, they saw a figure of shifting light, sometimes crowned in flame, sometimes veiled in shadow. Its gaze promised both glory and ruin. Farmers woke drenched in cold sweat, clutching at half-remembered prayers. By sunrise they whispered of an omen, the one who listens when the galaxy sleeps. Far to the galactic north, in the forge cloisters of Griffin Omicron, the adepts heard strange harmonics in their machine hymns.
A single note, alien and perfect, threaded through the chant of 1,000 throats.
At first they thought it was a fault in the choir engines. Then came visions, furnaces burning with colors beyond the spectrum, gears turning in patterns that defied reason. A junior tech priest claimed to see a figure in the molten glare, a silhouette with wings of living fire. He spoke its name only once before sealing his tongue with sacred iron. Pilgrims crossing the void between shrine worlds began to tell of a presence that brushed their thoughts during the long nights of travel. Some felt sudden hope, others an inexplicable dread. A few claimed to hear a single word in a voice neither male nor female, a word they could never remember upon waking. Yet they carried its echo like a brand upon the heart, and their prayers grew both fervent and fearful. On the frontier planet of Caravane, soldiers posted to the storm-racked poles reported battles that never occurred. They woke to the sound of war drums pounding through the night sky, only to find the tundra empty and the air still. When the storms cleared, crimson sigils lay burned into the ice marks no wind or flame could erase. Astropaths across a dozen sectors began to shiver without cause. In their trance choirs they felt a new note, a subtle chord hidden beneath the familiar roar of the warp. It was neither wholly malign nor benign. It simply was a presence vast enough to ripple through every thought that reached into the immaterium. Some called it a new demon prince, others an omen of the Emperor's wrath.
None could silence the whispers. Through hive spires and desert shrines, through the echoing void between stars, the legend grew.
Names multiplied. The crowned silence, the harp of night, the flame that walks. Each retelling shaped the figure anew, a savior, a monster, a herald of inevitable doom. Few agreed on its form, but all agreed on this. Something had awakened in the depths of chaos, and its shadow was already stretching across the galaxy. The Imperium did what it has always done. It prayed, it feared, and it told stories. And in the hidden reaches of the warp, the daemon listened, smiling at the echoes of its own rising myth. The Imperium is an ocean of countless worlds, but its hidden sentinels felt the ripple almost at once. Across the star-spanning domains of man, the ancient machinery of vigilance stirred to life. What the common faithful knew only as rumor reached the highest echelons of power as a silent alarm. Within the black halls of the Inquisition, shadowed agents sifted through fragments of astropathic transmissions. Words that had crossed the void in 1,000 different tongues carried the same disquieting cadence, a presence unnamed, a legend rising too swiftly to be mere superstition. Ordo Malleus savants compared the scattered accounts, their minds honed to recognize the spore of demonic ascent. Every pattern, every whispered epithet, the crowned silence, the harp of night, spoke of something more than mortal fancy. Lord Inquisitor Kelric stood in the cold chamber of his flagship and traced sigils of warding across a star map dense with Imperial territory. He had hunted demons across 3 centuries of unending service, yet the subtlety of this manifestation chilled him. No single world marked the source. The disturbance was everywhere and nowhere, a web of quiet infection. He ordered the most secret archives opened and the oldest prophecies consulted. Among the dust of forbidden tomes, a single phrase recurred like a pulse, the birth of a nightmare that wears the galaxy's name. From Titan, the grey marble moon hidden within the Sol system's shadows, came the answering stir of the Grey Knights. These warriors, the Emperor's final bulwark against the warp, sensed the change like the scent of ozone before a storm. Their Grand Masters convened in the Hall of Purity, a vault of silver and basalt etched with wards older than memory. Psychic resonance thrummed through the chamber as each knight read the omens in silence. Brother Captain Erindor spoke first, his voice the calm of iron before battle. This is no common demon prince. It is a pattern of the fourfold power, a creature shaped by all the gods of chaos rare, and dangerous beyond measure. Others nodded, their thoughts sheathed in discipline. Yet even among these warriors bred for fearlessness, unease flickered like distant lightning. Orders rippled outward with the cold precision of a blade's edge. Strike cruisers were readied, their holds packed with sanctified weapons and relics of banishment. Inquisitorial agents vanished into the void, each a silent knife poised to strike at the first sign of corporeal manifestation. Astropathic choirs were doubled and warded anew, their minds fortified against the subtle whispers now seeping through the warp's currents. Yet those whispers proved maddeningly elusive. Every attempt to fix the creature's location ended in echoes and mirages. Scribes reported visions of a crown of shifting fire, only for the image to melt into nothingness. The Grey Knights meditated upon the Emperor's light and found it steady yet distant, as though the master of mankind himself watched and waited. The Imperium's vigil tightened. On every frontier, From the fortress worlds of the Segmentum Obscurus to the shrine systems of the Ultima, the faithful prepared for a threat they could neither see nor name. The Inquisition knew the war had already begun, not with the clash of armies, but with the quiet spreading of a myth too potent to ignore. And in the hidden heart of the warp, the demon crowned in the silence of chaos felt their searching gaze and welcomed it. For the game it had begun was not a battle to be avoided, but a dance it had already won. The tides of the warp moved like a restless dream around the demon, their colors dimming to a quiet dusk. The clamor of mortal prayers and the searching vigilance of the Imperium faded into a distant murmur, like surf retreating from a lonely shore. Here, in the secret depths of the Immaterium, silence gathered, a silence that invited thought. It turned its gaze inward. Power beyond measure coursed through its form, yet beneath that endless tide something older still lingered, the faintest echo of the mortal it had once been. The demon sought it not from weakness but from a curiosity it could neither quell nor explain. For a being born of chaos, the past should have been ash-long scattered, and yet fragments remained, like faint stars visible through a storm. A memory surfaced of no image at first, only the feel of warm rain on skin. The scent of wet earth stirred, so fragile it might vanish with a single breath. There had been a name once, though the syllables lay beyond reach, their shape dissolved by eternity. The demon tried to recall it, and felt the sound slip through its mind like water through open fingers. Another fragment followed, the echo of a voice, soft and familiar, speaking words of comfort. No face accompanied it, only the impression of trust and the distant ache of loss. That ache surprised the demon. It had mastered the storms of the warp, commanded the nightmares of mortals, yet there was a sorrow untouched by its newfound power. The Immaterium around it pulsed with slow, sympathetic light. Currents of thought brushed against the demon's awareness, as if the warp itself watched this quiet search. Was it amusement or recognition? The demon could not tell. It considered what remained of the mortal self. Not the fleeting memories that crumbled like dry leaves, but the pattern beneath the will to endure, the capacity to wonder. Perhaps these were not remnants at all, but the foundation upon which its new form had risen. The thought brought neither comfort nor regret, only a deeper understanding of the truth it had become. To be a creature of chaos was to embody change without end. Yet even in change there are roots, and even the wildest storm carries the memory of calm waters. The demon felt that memory like a shadowed heartbeat, a rhythm it no longer possessed, yet could never fully forget. Slowly the fragments dimmed, the scent of rain faded, the echo of the voice dissolved, and the nameless ache receded into the endless dark. The demon let them go without struggle. Power and eternity awaited. The mortal past could offer neither. Still, as the last trace of its former self slipped into silence, a whisper lingered with neither promise nor warning, but a simple truth: what is lost is never entirely gone. The demon turned its gaze outward once more, and the Immaterium welcomed it with a hush that felt almost like acceptance. The Immaterium stirred in slow, unending tides, a sea without shore or horizon. The demon drifted within its vast expanse, power coursing through every thread of its being, yet the silence around it remained unbroken. In that silence lay a truth older than stars, a truth it now understood with the clarity of one who has crossed every threshold. It had once been mortal, a single fragile life, no different from the billions who toil beneath distant suns. Now it was eternal, crowned in the dread majesty of chaos. But as it surveyed the endless sea of the warp, the demon knew it was not unique. All around, Faint lights flickered like distant lanterns. Each shimmered with the same quiet fear and the same fragile hope that had once marked its own final breath. They were souls, countless, unnumbered, each beginning the journey it had taken. Some drifted alone, their mortal memories still clinging like tattered veils. Others already bent beneath the first whispers of temptation. From every corner of the galaxy, death fed these ocean warriors fallen in battle, children lost to sickness, priests who had prayed their entire lives for salvation. None escaped the warp's patient reach. The diamond watched as the cycle unfolded.
A newly dead soul hovered on the edge of awareness, bewildered by the silence of a body left behind.
Around it, the warp shifted with colors of impossible beauty. The same subtle whispers that once caressed the demon now curled through that soul's thoughts, promises of strength, of comfort, of truths too vast for mortal minds. It reached, hesitated, reached again. Elsewhere, a second spirit faltered in the mists of memory. Images of family and homeland flickered and dimmed, turning to ash as the immaterium's tides lapped at the edges of identity. The demon felt the first wound form, invisible but final. Soon that soul too would be ready for the dark god's attention. So it went, without beginning or end. For every mortal who died, the pattern repeated: wonder, fear, temptation, transformation. The gods of chaos neither hurried nor tired. Eternity was their ally. Each soul was both a prize and a story. And the warp gathered them all with infinite patience. The demon sensed no triumph in this revelation, only the quiet certainty of inevitability. Its own rise was merely one thread in an endless tapestry, a design woven long before its mortal heart had ever beaten. Others would follow, others had already begun. From the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the faint echo of mortal prayers reached the demon like the sighing of a distant wind. It listened, knowing that every plea for salvation, every cry of despair, only deepened the melody of the warp's eternal hunger. The immaterium darkened and brightened in a single breath. New lights appeared, tiny and trembling. The cycle began again. The diamond turned away, its crown of shifting fire glowing like a second star. In the infinite night of the warp, it moved on without haste, carrying the knowledge that there is no final victory, no lasting peace, only the ceaseless turning of souls into echoes of itself. The galaxy would feed the immaterium forever. The cycle would never break, and beyond every mortal death the quiet snare of chaos waited, patient and eternal.